They were kind of behind paywalls or in books, and they were not really a mainstream kind of thing. So we kind of joked and said, we could probably make a simple projection system that would get us 98% of the way towards a good projection system. Uh, we never really did anything with that at the time. Uh, Tom Tango used a similar idea individually, but we hadn't told him or anything. He came up with a similar idea to do Marcel, which was a simple projection system that was also tried to design to be very simple and get us most of the way to a good projection system. So fast forward to 2001, 2002, I was writing um, a blog for Baseball Primer, now Baseball Think Factory, back at the time, and I was writing a lot about transactions, and it seemed that it would kind of be useful for a writer to, have a source of projection. Because if you're talking about the future, having some way to at least back up your words, or to buttress your words, or even possibly to disagree with your words is very useful for a writer. Because really, even sabermetric writing, it's about telling stories. Uh, and numbers enhance these stories. Because numbers are very descriptive. People will say numbers are dry, and numbers can be dry. But if you look at the back of a baseball card, it tells the story of a player's career. You can see when he had a tough season, or when he switched positions, or moved to a new league, or you can see when he played 50 games for some reason. But you can see that in the statistics. So anyway, I'm kind of getting off topic here. Uh, I did have a math major in college, a mediocre student, but good enough to know the basics of putting together a predictive model. And ZIP started out as a simple projection system. ZIP stands for Szymborski Projection System, but it has a Z instead of an S because I thought that SIPs looked like a juice box for hipsters. SIPs. I mean, you can almost see because there were still hipsters back then. You can see them with like the juice box, with like some sort of logo from the '70s, and they got some sips. Uh, and so I made it Zips because I wanted to rhyme with Voris McCracken's Dips. Because at the time, Zips utilized some of his research of defense independent pitching statistics, or DIPS, which was fairly new at the time. It was a little avant garde still at that point. We talk a lot about batting average and balls in play and stuff now, but that stuff wasn't as popular when you go back 15 years ago. There was actually a lot of suspicion in the sabermetrics that that kind of thing worked. Um, so that's where Zips came from. I had the little I and I had the little S at first because it looked like Chips, California Highway Patrol, because I loved that show when I was a kid. That and Dukes of Hazzard. Um, yeah,
Right.
I'm a little nerdy, as you can see from these references. So anyway,
I'm in the same boat. I watched those too. I grew up in the '70s, so
if I could have found a Dukes of Hazzard themed way to name the system, I totally would have used it because I love the Dukes of Hazzard, and my mom would try to tell me that the Dukes weren't on, but I always could. I could read at that point, and I could find the TV guide that the Dukes of Hazzard were on. The Dukes. Um, now, see, now my thoughts are all lost. Okay, Zips,
so
and I think
Zips.
I didn't keep the small s. I spelled it with a big S the first time, and Jay Jaffe, who at the time was also a blogger, picked up on it, so I didn't change the spelling at that point. And over time, and as computers got stronger and software got better, Zips expanded to become quite a complex series of algorithms today. But it's weird sometimes how you get into things, uh, but it's worked out the way. I mean, I can't complain.
Right. And so, are you still working on it now, or
Oh, I
like
am always working on Zips. There's always new data, new information, new ways to look at things. For instance, in the last few years, Zips has done. I've implemented a lot of information about hit ball play. Line drive data, fly ball data. Some of the plate discipline statistics that are available. I'm very careful about implementing new things because you don't want to mess up what you already have. I'm extremely careful. But there's always new data, and I'm always looking to see how to implement new data in a way that it actually aids the predictive model.
And how do you find that compares to out of the park baseball and kind of how it predicts how players do? Do you compare that at all or?
Well, I haven't been able to dig apart your. I'm not a programmer. I can't dig apart your. I don't know what algorithms you use.
Well, yeah,
I know you use Pacoda to derive
right,
some of the ratings from, and that of course is another excellent projection system developed by Nate Silver initially, and then maintained
right.
later by Colin Wires. So it's really hard to compare directly because I've never really tested that. But Zips does perform pretty well. Someone independent always looks at them once a year, and and I'm not a believer that projections are destiny. People are always like get mad at me and think I'm upset if a player's wrong. I'm like, I know I'm going to be wrong a lot. I'm not trying to. I mean, I am trying to predict the future, but the goal of Zips isn't to be. I always say it's to be the least bad way to project the future of any method.
Why is that? Why is it the least bad one?
Well, if the you mean why that's the goal?
Or
Because
yeah,
really,
yeah,
because there's so much fog and so many things we'll never know that that you're going to be wrong so often that it's really call it mathematical destiny. For instance, if you knew for a fact that each team in baseball was exactly a 500 team, you would never know that obviously. But imagine if you knew that for a fact that every single game was a coin flip. You would obviously predict teams to be around 500, but you still would be wrong by like 9 games or more for 20% of the league, and that is with perfect knowledge of what's going on. You would know exactly what the odds are of every game, and you would still expect 6 teams to win 72 games or fewer, or 90 and more, just from random chance, because uh, there's our knowledge is limited by just I don't know how to word it. Our knowledge has a definite ceiling. So you go in expecting to be wrong a lot, and you go in kind of knowing how often you'll be wrong. But that's kind of the fun of it, trying to get a little more.
right. And I mean that's the whole thing with out of the park. I see people will sometimes will complain about how certain players are performing in their game or whatever, but out of the park is just taking reality as it is, at the start of the 2015 season, if that's what you're playing, and then going from there, and things can go various ways.
Yeah,
It's not
you that has to happen because that's how reality works.
right.
It's very uncertain. If I don't know what the point would be of playing a simulation if everything you thought was going to happen was going to happen, because one, that's not really even simulating reality anymore, because there's no general manager that will ever exist that knows exactly what will happen at all times. Uh, it's I would be while it would be extremely profitable if Zips, for instance, knew exactly how each player would be, that would kind of take the fun out of it for me, because it's fun to be surprised. It's fun to have things turn out differently than you expect. Not so much that people stop reading you or anything, but you do want these things to happen. You do want these interesting things to happen, and that's what makes it interesting. And I know
So
I
so
said the word interesting a lot the last
Inter-
sentence, but
that's
it is.
interesting. But so you'd rather be surprised than rich, is what
Yeah.
you're saying.
Well, you I wouldn't make it
I
an
wouldn't.
either or, but
I wouldn't turn down the money,
yeah, it's like let's not do this. I don't want this to appreciate. I don't want this video to pop up at a salary negotiation in the future. But you don't want to know everything, because really, I mean, that's almost a life thing. If you know everything that's going to happen, it's just not that interesting.
but right.
I'll stop saying the word interesting. I said it like five
Well,
times.
well, and you've been playing out of the park since version 1, correct? Is that what
I
you
was.
talked about?
I'm trying to remember what year it was. It was the year that the Orioles had all those first round picks. And I remember my first league of Out of the Park. It was a very early. It was very texty. There weren't a lot of graphic elements at that point. Why don't I remember the year? 99?
Yeah,
Is that right?
1999 was when the first version was released.
It might have been the second version. It was. it was either right after the Orioles had all those draft picks in the first round, or immediately after, because I had like Matt Riley and Richard Stahl, and they actually turned out really well in my simulation. I think Matt Riley actually won 300 games for me.
Wow.
He
And
no
where is he
he
now?
he I don't want to think about poor Riley. That
Uh,
uh, pictures of their injuries. It's so sad. In fact, there was an I remember in my sim there was a pitcher that retired, a prospect. I can't remember who it was, but in my sim in this season, he retired because he had botched elective eye surgery and was blind in one eye. And I'm not making that up. That was
right.
the event. What was his name? It was someone for the Nationals. It wasn't a big name, but it's fun to see those little things. But man, that would be sad in real life to have a picture just have to retire because he went blind in an eye from an elective surgery, LASIK surgery gone wrong or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm sure they would be going to the absolute best LASIK eye surgeon they could go to. So, uh, sounds like maybe you went to a quack in the game. Some back
You'd
alley
think they could
surgery.
afford it.
Yeah.
I mean, you should see what I'm playing, guys. When I'm playing Ryan Howard could pay for every pitcher in baseball to have LASIK surgery.
Right. So, you know, who do you usually like to play with? I mean, you're using the Phillies right now as sort of obviously for the challenge of it, but is that usually what you do? Pick a
Well,
team where there's a challenge, or
I like going into I like starting pretty much at any simulation, especially out of the park when you can start at any time at any point with the historical database. Uh, I like to get into situations where there is a specific challenge that kind of just is enticing. Uh, for instance, with the Phillies, it's obviously rebuild the Phillies. It's a very simple challenge. I mean, not the challenge isn't simple, but the concept of the challenge is simple.
right?
But there's other challenges. My first my first on 16, I was trying to get the Tigers over the hump, and that's another kind of challenge, kind of in the opposite end, to try to keep the team together as long as possible and winning. I made it a few years, but I kind of ran out of resources. It kind of fell apart pretty dramatically. I never got that World Series trophy, which made me very sad. I actually had a hard drive last week crash, so I did
That's
not I did not see how bad that team would get. But it's fun to try to take over specific challenges. I am a nerdy guy, but I do have my baseball history nerdery is as in depth as my stat nerdery, so I always like some of these historical challenges, like trying to redo the '89 Orioles. That's always an old favorite. It never quite works out because that team was way better than they had any right to be.
It
Jeff
was
Ballard.
was Brady Anderson there then?
Yeah, Brady Anderson. He wasn't
Okay.
good yet. He wasn't good
Yeah,
Brady yet.
he hadn't hit 50 home runs yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was that because I'm from Baltimore originally, so I'm an Orioles fan, and the '89 team was one of my fondest memories, but also one of my saddest memories because they just collapsed down after the All Star break. They lost a ton of games in a row. The Blue Jays caught them, and they had that final weekend where they had to win 2 out of 3 to force a one-game playoff, which did not happen. Greg Olson threw that wild pitch, and it was all over. Uh, and the Orioles never really followed up from that. They had a lot to go right in that season. They had Jeff Ballard. Uh, it's funny now with all the focus on batting average and balls in play. It's funny looking back at Jeff Ballard. He had almost no strikeouts at all that season. It's almost ludicrous. He had like 60 strikeouts in a season, in a full season, 57 or something. I actually should check that up. Um, and then the Orioles. That was the year that Mickey Tettleton became a big thing in Baltimore. Where was it? 62 strikeouts. He won 18 games with 62 strikeouts. That is just, it's ridiculous to think about now. And
Right.
and then later the Orioles, they traded for Glenn Davis, which was pretty awful. they traded Mickey Tettleton for one of the Jeff Robinsons. So